Alright, so our end result is going to be a GIF that hopefully is a little inspirational, uplifting, thinking about our warmer weather coming. And as this loads, so we have some grass kind of fluttering back and forth. We have a flower rising. We have some text growing. And we have our sun fading in. Alright, so this first little activity will be trying to recreate this as close as possible to what we have as the original one here, and then in the process we're going to be learning how to animate in Photoshop. Alright, so the first step of this would be to download the files so that, I mean, you could search around for other stuff, but it's a little bit quicker and easier. So we can click on this Google Drive folder, we can click the download arrow up here and say download, and we will save that somewhere to your BKGA folder. Alright, we don't really have to worry with most of these projects now about big files and processing across the network because they don't really create big files. Alright, as we can see here though also, it does say it's saving it as a zip file, which is a compressed file. Alright, so that's okay. I'm going to put it into my folder here. Alright, and then to basically use those files though, I can click here and say show in folder. Alright, and then from this zip folder, all I have to do is right click and I can say extract all. Let me show you. The little screen popped up on the side, so just in case you're not quite sure what to do with that, I'm just going to delete this for a second. And actually, I'll just recreate that. So if I right click it, as I was saying, and do extract all, you'll get a little pop-up window that looks like this, and we'll just say extract, and when that's done, it creates a folder with those images in there. Alright, so that's the first step of our little activity, is to download those files. Alright, then we can go into Photoshop. Alright, here's our finished project. And what we would do is do a file new, and we'll use some presets to get our frame size and resolution. So if I go to film and video, I can choose our HDTV 1080p. We can see it's 72 pixels per inch, and do a create. Alright, so we kind of have a blank slate here. First thing I would recommend doing is getting all of your objects into kind of the work area or into the project. So in Photoshop, to bring an image into this project, we're going to say File, Place Embedded. Alright, and now I can see I can start with the sky. Alright, I can place that, and then I can stretch it out. Alright, and as we were saying, and now we don't have to hold the shift key. I guess they've kind of changed that, assuming probably that everybody, you know, wants your aspect or your proportions to constrain, so it's kind of built into there. So again, File, Place Embedded, and then I'm just dragging the corner points to stretch this out and scale it. Then we have to either press Enter or the checkbox up at the top here in order to finalize that transformation. Alright, then I would bring in my grass, which is my next picture here. It's free transparent grass texture. I can place that. This time, I don't want to stretch it proportionally, because then to get it to fill, my grass is like really big, which I guess could be a zoom in look, but to kind of have it like at a smaller scale, what I can do is now hold the shift key, and kind of opposite of what our previous learning had said, now I can stretch it out and unconstrain it. Alright, so I want that width to be moving independently of our sky or our height. Alright, if you brought them in a different order, which then, you know, if you brought in the grass first and then the sky, you may have something like this. So we just have to think about our layer ordering. Alright, whatever is on the top is going to be closest to you. So I want that grass to be closer than the sky, so I can just drag it up, and now I have that there on that layer. Alright, so that would be 2 images. The next one is our flower. I think I actually had to find a different one. Yeah, I lost my original one from the demo, which, alright, so now we have this placed in here. And then I'm not going to worry about the size right now, but I do want to worry about is the this background. Now, typically we would try to do this the easy way. We would use the magic wand, right? Which is nice now. It's seeing a nice contrast there, right? So it's finding the edges. When I press delete though, or backspace, it's telling me that it's can't be done, or because the smart object is not directly editable, all right? So whenever we place an image in Photoshop, if we see this little kind of icon on the bottom right corner of this, it's indicating it's a smart object. If you want to get some detailed information about that, I did put a link in the notes, and I'm going to just take a minute to kind of explain the benefit, or I guess we could say the pros and cons of using smart objects. So let's see where. All right. So I did put that in the notes here, and if we go to animation in Photoshop, smart objects can be resizing without losing image quality. However, so that's the advantage of them. All right. We can make them larger, or really what happens is if it was what's called a rasterized image, if we were to shrink it down and then make it bigger again, it would become blurry because it kind of locks in that resolution. When we have smart objects, we can decrease their size and then make them larger, and we don't get that blurriness. However, as we're seeing, some edits are not possible, such as the brush or deleting paint bucket, because that's actually kind of what they call a destructive type of edit, which you're modifying those pixels. All right, so it is necessary, as we see in the case here, to what's called rasterize this layer. So all we have to do for that is right-click it, and you can see where you right-click does make a difference. I'm right on the thumbnail here, and right-clicking, I don't see the option. What I have to do is right-click kind of over here where the words are, and now I have many more options, and I would choose rasterize layer, and now if I press delete, it goes away. All right, so that's something that you'll have to do for this file, and any others that you bring in and they're smart objects. If you want to really make what we think of as destructive edits, or what we call them, that's what you have to do there. Yes, question? All right, so now we have our images placed. All right, I'm going to just kind of resize this flower that's in here, or daffodil to be specific. All right, so I'm going to do a Control T. That will give us this box around it, which then allows us to resize. And now, as we were saying and learning, we don't have to hold the Shift key. It's if you drag from the corner or from the sides, it will resize that automatically. All right, so I have that in the front, and I would press Enter to accept that, and I would just move this flower behind the grass or underneath of it. So now it's going to give us the appearance that it's going to be kind of rising up. All right. So that is importing pictures. All right. Then we have our sun. We're going to create using a shape tool. So for that, I will come over to my toolbar. I think by default it's on the rectangle tool. So you can just press and hold the rectangle to get the ellipse. And then I'm going to click and drag. Now I am going to hold the Shift key because I want that to be a nice perfect circle. Your color, you should have up in this, what they call it like the ribbon area at the top here. So I see my fill color is here, but also, which is going to give us a little more depth, and it's going to look a little flat, so we can choose a gradient, all right, as a fill option. And then to go one step further, instead of making this a linear gradient where the colors kind of go, they change top to bottom, now we can change it to radial, and now the colors expand from the middle out, kind of like a circular or radial pattern. Lastly, what I'll do is kind of adjust my colors. I think it looks more realistic if the white is in the center, so I'm moving this slider over to the left. I can move this one to the right, and then just by double clicking it, I can bring up my color picker, and I can choose whatever color I want for that, and now it applies to there. If you want more colors, you can also just click in the middle, double click them, and you can introduce all kinds of colors, or you can take this one and drag it down. All right, so that would be our sun creating. And then finally, our last item to really put in here before we animate is our text. All right, so you can kind of put in your own spring message if you can think of something creative. You know, spring is in the air. I don't know, something like that. And same thing here, selecting it. Maybe and actually something useful here, if I go to the picker, and if I drag my cursor off to the side, it turns into an eyedropper, which I can then sample my color from the sun, which I think creates a nice complement. All right, and then I could transform this. I can make it a little bigger this way too by bringing that out. And I think the last thing I do want to talk about here is in Photoshop what are called layer effects. All right, so if I go to the bottom of my layers panel and I click on the FX button, I'm going to add a stroke. So that will give us an outline around the text. All right, and that makes it look a little more defined. All right, so after we get all of our items in here, then we can start to animate. All right, to open up our timeline, we'll go to the window pull down at the top and make sure timeline is selected. Once you do that, you should have kind of an empty timeline. And in Photoshop, they allow you to create frame-by-frame animation or a video timeline. If you had individual drawings or maybe like some multiple pictures like we did, like a stop-motion project, that could be beneficial to that. But for our purposes, for actually animating, our video timeline is going to be more useful. So we're just going to press this button to create that timeline. Once you do that, you basically have something similar to what we see in Premiere, in which each layer kind of shows the duration. So I kind of think it would be nice to maybe have things kind of step in. All right, so if we kind of offset these things, so maybe the flower would come in first, so I could take my sun layer, this ellipse, and I can kind of stagger this so it doesn't come in quite yet. I can take my text, kind of do the same thing, and make that come in a little bit more. Actually, though, I should see what my time, I need to get my final time in here. So on the bottom here is our time code, and if we double click on this time code down here, we can, it should bring up a little window that allows us to go to a time. I don't know why mine's not, oh, I'm on the wrong screen, I think. There we go. There we go. So if I go into here and I say set time hours, minutes, seconds, let's say about 3 seconds again. So that moves my playhead to there. This is our zoom slider, so we can, you know, make our timeline not take up as much space. I can kind of see the entire duration. All right, so now I can trim all my layers down, and I think I can do a multiple selection. Yep, there I go. So now I can make, oh, even though they're all selected, they didn't all want to move at the same time, but that's what we're doing here, so that they're all going to end at 3 seconds. All right, so now I would have the ground, the grass there, the sun pops up, our text pops up, and I want my flower here. All right, so that's basically our durations, and then we would go in there, and now we can really get to our animation. So I'm going to start with the flower. That's going to be a movement. I'm going to click the arrow on the side, and now we see very similar things to what we saw in Premiere. So I'm going to make my flower kind of rise up. So I'm going to move it down here to start, and then if I do position, I can keyframe that, and actually let's think about where our timeline is. So I want my animation to start at the beginning here. So I'm going to move my playhead, click the position stopwatch. That created my keyframe. And then I'm going to say I want that to come in and be animated. Oop, gotta make sure I have the right layer selected. And I'm gonna use the arrow key because I couldn't quite grab onto it. Oh, there we go. So you can use the arrow or drag up this object to get it into position. And now we see the flower rising up. All right, so there's our first animation. The second one we'll do is the sun. We're going to make that fade in. All right, actually maybe that might be a little bit too late. I want that to happen a little quicker. So same thing, open the layer. And now we're going to do opacity. And then we go to our opacity setting in the layers. Make it 0 so we don't see it there. And then a second or so later, we can increase this. So now we see our sun is fading in. Finally, our text. I'm going to make this start a little sooner there. And I'm going to make our text get larger. So at this point, at the beginning, so I'm going to say transform again. And I can do a Control T. And I'm going to press Alt and Shift to have it scale from the center. Make this really small. And then I'm just going to move over. Oh, I have to press Enter because the little boxes around it, it thinks I'm still adjusting my scale. And then I can do a Control T again and stretch this out. And now we see our second keyframe. Press Enter. All right, and there we go. So now if we play this, press spacebar, flower rise, sun fade in, text get larger. Oh, and that got a little shorter in the end. All right, so at that point I would save it. And if you do save as, just to double check, you should have a Photoshop PSD file. All right, that is going to retain your layers. And then finally, to get our animated GIF, we will say File, Export, and Save for Web. You will get another screen that pops up. And it's just loading on my other screen. Once it refreshes, here we go. So this is what you'll see. Basically, all your defaults will kind of just leave the way they are. This would probably be useful actually for some of the videos. Maybe actually, Richard, we were talking about your file being too big. We might be able to bring it into Photoshop and kind of downgrade it with file size. Now I'm thinking about that. But for these projects, we should just be able to save. You can kind of navigate around in here and look at your resolution. A lot of times GIFs kind of make things a little choppy. All right, but that would be the case here. You just save it. And then it'll process from there.